Have you ever heard someone say, let's get the ball rolling, or you hit it out of the park, and wondered what sports have to do with everyday English? In American English, sports idioms are everywhere, in business meetings, casual conversations, and even daily life. If you don't understand them, you might miss the real meaning behind what people are saying. In this episode, you'll learn how these expressions work, what they actually mean, and how to recognize them instantly while listening. So get ready to boost your fluency, sound more natural, and finally understand English the way native speakers really use it. Hello, and welcome to your YouTube channel, Learn English Lab. Today's podcast topic name is Sports Idioms Americans Use Advanced Listening Practice.
Yeah, and our underlying mission for this deep dive is really to take you, the listener, far beyond those comfortable boundaries of, textbook grammar and standard vocabulary lists. We're embarking on an exploration to crack the code of what is essentially a hidden cultural operating system.
Right, a hidden operating system.
Exactly. It's this unwritten, largely unconscious software that native English speakers rely on constantly. They use it to convey nuanced emotion, to signal urgency, to de-escalate tension, and to establish a shared group identity.
The goal here is to shift your experience from merely translating words in your head, which, let's be honest, is exhausting, to actually feeling the underlying rhythm of the language, the history and psychology of English.
Oh, completely. It's about feeling it, not just computing it.
Because there is a very real, tangible, and often painful cost to missing out on this hidden language. To understand why this matters so much, we really need to look at a scenario that happens every single day in international business.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so there's a software developer, let's call her Priya. She works at a highly competitive, fast-paced financial technology startup in San Francisco.
Okay, the classic Silicon Valley environment. High stress.
Very high stress. And by all traditional metrics, Priya's English is completely flawless. She understands complex technical documentation, writes perfect emails, and she could undoubtedly score top marks on any standardized language proficiency exam.
Right. She's technically proficient.
Exactly. So picture Priya sitting in a sprint review meeting. And for anyone unfamiliar with software development, a sprint review is a critical meeting where the team looks at all the coding work they've done over the past 2 weeks, evaluates it, and decides what to do next. The pressure is on.
Oh, absolutely. Those meetings are intense.
Right. So during this meeting, her team lead looks at the project timeline, points to a specific feature Priya has been working on, and says, we're going to punt on that feature for now.
Oh, wow. Okay. And if we isolate that specific moment and view it through the strict filter of literal textbook English, the word punt simply means to kick something.
Right, like physically kicking a ball.
Yeah, specifically to drop a ball from your hands and kick it before it hits the ground.
So Priya does what any logical person relying on textbook definitions would do, right? She interprets the instruction literally.
Oh, no.
Yeah. She assumes the team lead is abandoning the feature entirely, essentially kicking it away into the garbage. So she leaves the meeting and spends the next 3 days quietly, frantically building a complex back-end workaround.
Because she truly believes the original plan is dead and she needs to save the project.
Exactly. But then Thursday rolls around. They have their next alignment meeting, and the team lead asks for a status update on that specific feature. It turns out punt did not mean abandon.
Not at all. In American football, a punt is a strategic move. It's where you temporarily give the ball to the other team because you can't score right now, but you plan to get it back later.
Right. The team lead simply meant they were delaying the decision to the next development cycle, not throwing it away.
Oh, so Priya wasted 3 days of intense effort.
She did. But here is the truly cruel reality of that situation, the part that actually hurts her career. Nobody in that room blamed her English.
Wow.
Yeah.
They blamed her judgment.
They did.
The tragedy of this invisible fluency test is that native speakers are completely blind to their own reliance on idioms. When Priya spent 3 days building a workaround, her colleagues didn't think, oh, Priya must have a gap in her cultural vocabulary.
Right. They thought Priya lacks strategic awareness. Or maybe Priya isn't listening during meetings.
Or worse, Priya is going rogue and completely ignoring team directives. These expressions, they act as invisible gatekeepers. Native speakers use them dozens of times a week without a second thought.
Yeah, they cross over from the football field, the baseball diamond, and the boxing ring straight into boardrooms, marketing agencies, and living rooms.
And understanding them is the absolute dividing line between technical language proficiency and true native-like idiomatic competence.
Thinking about Priya's situation, learning a language the traditional way feels a lot like learning the mechanical rules of chess.
That's a great way to put it.
You memorize how the pieces move. You know the knight moves in an L shape. You know the bishop stays on its color and moves diagonally. You learn the grammar, the syntax, the vocabulary.
But without understanding these idioms, you are completely blind to the metagame.
Exactly. You are staring at the board, you know the legal moves, but you have absolutely no idea why your opponent is suddenly smiling, or why a seemingly minor pawn move carries so much psychological weight in the room.
You are playing the physical board, but you aren't playing the person sitting across from you. And taking that chess analogy further, if you don't understand the metagame, you don't even realize you are losing until the game is over.
Right, you're just totally missing the strategic intent behind the words.
Yeah, and what makes this deep dive so crucial is how that strategic intent, that underlying cultural operating system, completely transforms depending on the geographical soil you are standing on.
Oh, right, because the rules of the metagame actually change.
They do. We are going to explore 4 distinct nations of sports idioms today: the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada.
Because the geography dictates everything about how you should speak.
Yeah.
Right. And more importantly, how you should interpret what's being said to you.
Absolutely. To really see this in action, imagine a single, massive, multinational business deal. A dominant American tech giant is buying an old, established publishing firm in London.
Okay, setting the stage.
And as part of the merger, they are opening new satellite offices in Sydney and Toronto. This single deal forces all 4 of these cultural operating systems to collide in the same boardroom.
Let's look at the American landscape first, because that one is huge. The American landscape is defined by baseball, American football, basketball, and boxing.
Yeah.
And just thinking about those sports, they're physical, they're loud, and they are incredibly dramatic.
Exactly. The defining characteristic of American sports idioms is the embracing of high emotional stakes and clear, decisive outcomes. Winning and losing.
Right. There's no middle ground.
None. Americans use language to escalate the drama of a moment. In our hypothetical merger, picture the American CEO from New York flying into London to address the new combined team. He wants to motivate them after a successful quarter.
Right. He's not going to stand at the podium and politely say, "We had a satisfactory financial period."
Never. He leans into the microphone and announces, "We knocked it out of the park this quarter, and let me tell you, we are not done swinging."
Oh, that's such a classic line. The metaphor is inherently aggressive. It's triumphant. It evokes the image of a crowd roaring as a baseball flies into the night sky.
And to the American ear, it feels entirely natural and deeply motivating.
But now let's look at the UK side of that exact same merger. Those London publishing executives are sitting in the audience listening to this American CEO talk about knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, and to them, it's a completely different linguistic universe. It is a profound culture clash.
Because their sports are so different, right?
Exactly. In the UK, the sporting metaphors are drawn primarily from cricket, association football, what Americans call soccer rugby, and horse racing. And the tone of British idioms is heavily understated, self-deprecating, and often laced with dry irony.
So let's flip the scenario. Imagine one of the British editors discovers a catastrophic legal issue in a manuscript that might delay the entire merger.
Okay, high stakes again.
Yeah. If an American encountered that problem, they might run down the hallway shouting, "We completely dropped the ball. This is a disaster."
Very dramatic.
But the British editor, facing the exact same existential threat to the company, will lean back in their chair, take a sip of tea, sigh, and say to their colleagues, "Right, I think we found ourselves on a bit of a sticky wicket with this contract."
Or perhaps they'd say, "We certainly didn't quite hit that one for 6.
Let's actually pause and explain sticky wicket for our listeners, because honestly, it sounds incredibly quaint, almost like something out of a children's book.
It really does sound gentle, doesn't it?
It does. But it's actually describing a terrifying situation in the sport of cricket.
Yeah, the literal mechanics of a sticky wicket reveal why it's such a powerful metaphor. In cricket, the pitch is the rectangular strip of rolled clay and grass in the center of the field where the action happens.
Right, the core area.
Historically, before modern covers were used, if it rained heavily and then the sun came out and baked the pitch, the clay would become sticky and uneven. A sticky wicket.
So the ground itself is compromised.
Exactly. When a fast bowler throws a rock-hard, leather-wrapped cricket ball at 90 miles per hour onto that uneven, sticky surface, the ball doesn't bounce cleanly.
That sounds dangerous.
highly unpredictable and physically dangerous. It might skid low, it might suddenly pop up towards the batsman's face. So the batsman has to survive this treacherous, unpredictable situation through sheer concentration and defensive skill.
Oh, wow. So when the British executive says we're on a sticky wicket, they aren't actually downplaying the danger at all.
Not at all.
They are acknowledging that the situation is volatile, unpredictable, and potentially catastrophic. But by wrapping it in this polite, understated phrase, they are signaling to the entire room, I see the danger, but I am maintaining my composure. I expect you all to do the same.
That is the exact psychological mechanism at play. They are deliberately understating the catastrophe to manage the emotional temperature of the room.
That's brilliant, but also dangerous for a learner.
Extremely. Consider the danger for a language learner who doesn't understand this. If you are that American CEO and your British counterpart tells you a contract negotiation is a sticky wicket and you interpret that literally as a minor annoying inconvenience like stepping in gum, you are going to severely miscalculate your business strategy.
Which brings up a fascinating dilemma for the international professional. If I take that aggressive, triumphant American sports idiom and use it in that London publishing house, is it essentially the verbal equivalent of wearing a loud neon pink Hawaiian shirt to a formal, somber funeral?
That's hilarious, and yes.
I mean, technically, I'm wearing a shirt with buttons, I am fully dressed, but I am entirely misreading the social and cultural reality of the room.
The Hawaiian shirt analogy captures the discomfort perfectly. You have absolutely overshot the tone. And in business, overshooting the tone damages trust.
It really does.
If you are in a high-level meeting in Edinburgh, Scotland, and you try to motivate the room by demanding a Hail Mary strategy, you will be met with polite, icy blank stares. You will sound like an arrogant Hollywood movie character, not a colleague.
But the reverse is also true, right?
Oh, for sure. If you use a phrase like sticky wicket while trying to close a high-pressure real estate deal in Denver, Colorado, you won't sound calm and composed to the Americans.
You'll probably just sound weird.
Yeah, you will sound detached, perhaps a bit eccentric, and culturally entirely out of place. You won't sound like an insider who understands the urgency of the moment.
And then, as part of this merger, we have the new satellite office in Australia. Australia has its own incredibly distinct flavor, drawing from cricket, Aussie rules football, and swimming.
Yeah, Australia's cultural operating system is built around the concept of mateship, egalitarianism, humor, and a very specific kind of blunt directness.
Hierarchy is kind of a bad word there.
Inherently suspicious in Australian culture. You might be at a weekend barbecue with the new Sydney team, and a junior developer will openly say to the senior manager, "Mate, the boss really bowled me a googly with that new deadline."
Okay, we definitely need another mechanics check here for the listener. What on earth is a googly?
It's another brilliant cricket reference. Most bowlers in cricket spin the ball in a predictable direction based on their wrist action.
Right.
A googly is a delivery by a leg spin bowler where the ball is disguised to look like it will spin one way, but when it bounces, it violently spins in the exact opposite direction.
Oh, so it's a trick play.
It is designed to completely deceive the batsman. So when the Australian developer says the boss bowled me a googly, they mean they were handed a deceptive, unexpected challenge.
But the crucial difference is the tone. The Australian isn't saying this angrily. They're probably holding a drink and laughing about it.
Exactly. It's vivid, it's self-deprecating, and it proves that they don't take themselves too seriously.
If a non-native speaker tries to navigate that Sydney barbecue using formal, perfectly constructed textbook English, something like, "The supervisor presented me with an unforeseen and deceptive timeline," they come across as incredibly stiff, defensive, and distant.
Completely. In Australia, the sports idiom is a social tool used to flatten the hierarchy and build an egalitarian bond. It says, we are all in this difficult game together.
And finally, we look at the Toronto office. Canada is a fascinating linguistic environment because it acts as a cultural bridge.
It really does. It draws heavily from its own national obsession, ice hockey, but it shares a massive border and media market with the U.S., so baseball and football idioms are everywhere.
Right.
Yet, culturally, Canada retains a touch of that British reserve and collective mindset.
So it's a hybrid. How does that sound in practice?
Well, a Canadian project manager dealing with a crisis might say, look, we're facing a tough deadline. We need to keep our heads up and pass the puck on this one.
Passing the puck. Notice the psychological focus of that hockey metaphor. Keep your heads up means staying aware of your surroundings to avoid getting hit by an opponent, right?
Exactly. And pass the puck is about relying on your teammates. It isn't about an individual American knocking it out of the park and being the solo hero.
So the Canadian idiom focuses heavily on teamwork, inclusion, and collective effort.
Yes, but if a dispute arises, a Canadian in Calgary might say someone dropped the gloves.
Drop the gloves.
Yeah. Every single Canadian immediately pictures an ice hockey game where two players literally throw their thick protective gloves onto the ice to engage in a bare-knuckle fistfight.
Oh, wow. So it gets aggressive.
It means confronting a problem head-on, aggressively, but within the accepted, unwritten rules of the game.
Okay, if context truly is everything, and the geographical soil dictates the rules, then for anyone trying to master American English, we have to look at the absolute giant in the room.
We do. We need to swing for the fences.
Nice. We have to dissect the cultural dominance of baseball.
When it comes to the United States, baseball is not just a sport. It is the single largest source of idiomatic English in the country.
Really? The single largest?
Without a doubt. To understand American English, you have to understand the footprint baseball has left on the language over the last 150 years.
A century and a half of language building. That means baseball idioms were being formed right after the American Civil War.
Exactly. It was essentially the sport that unified the country as it industrialized. Because of that incredibly deep historical root system, the result today is that tens of millions of Americans use these phrases daily without ever having attended a game, worn a glove, or watched a single inning of baseball.
So the vocabulary is completely detached from the sport for most speakers.
Completely. Think about the phrase, threw us a curveball.
Oh, I use that all the time.
Right. Mechanically, a curveball is a pitch thrown with specific spin so that it dives downward just as it reaches the batter, making it incredibly hard to hit. In business, it means a sudden, unexpected challenge or deception.
Or consider step up to the plate. In baseball, when it is your turn to bat, you must physically step into the batter's box, stand next to home plate, and face the pitcher alone.
There is nowhere to hide.
Yeah. In corporate America, it means taking personal responsibility when the pressure is immense. And these phrases are everywhere.
They really are. You hear them in corporate law firms, in intense real estate negotiations, and high-level financial analysis.
And even in casual settings, like people planning a neighborhood block party. For example, can you give me a ballpark figure?
The mechanics of ballpark figure are fascinating.
Let's hear it.
Early baseball stadiums, or ballparks, were massive, varying in size, and before computerized ticketing, it was very difficult to know the exact attendance. A sports reporter might ask the manager for a ballpark figure, an estimate of how many people were inside the physical structure.
And today, an accountant in Chicago uses it to ask for a rough estimate on a tax liability.
Exactly, or cover all your bases. In baseball, the defensive team must have a player positioned near first, second, and third base to prevent the runners from advancing.
If a base is left uncovered, the defense collapses.
Right. So in a modern logistics meeting, to cover all your bases means engaging in thorough, exhaustive preparation to ensure no details are missed.
Let me put you on the spot regarding the psychology of this, because this is the core of the issue for a language learner trying to decide when to use these.
Okay, lay it on me.
Let's say I am sitting in a tense boardroom negotiation. I can look at my team and say, the opposing counsel surprised us with unexpected evidence. Grammatically, that sentence is pristine.
Pristine but dry.
Exactly. But if I replace it with, the opposing counsel threw us a curveball, the entire energy of the sentence shifts. It suddenly possesses this visceral physical power.
It does.
Why does that happen? Why does a 150-year-old baseball term carry more psychological weight than a perfectly constructed academic sentence?
The answer lies in cognitive linguistics and the structural rhythm of the sport itself. Our brains process abstract concepts like corporate strategy or legal surprises much more easily when they are mapped onto physical, bodily experiences.
That makes sense.
And baseball is unique because it is not a fast, chaotic, continuous game like soccer or basketball. It has a very slow, highly deliberate, strategic pace.
Which makes it perfect for business.
Yes, that slowness makes it metaphorically incredibly rich. Every single pitch is a silent negotiation, a psychological duel between the pitcher and the batter. Every at-bat tells a miniature story of tension, strategy, anticipation, and consequence.
Oh, it's essentially a narrative engine.
Exactly. Because baseball possesses that built-in narrative quality, the language of the sport naturally fits the rhythm of life's big strategic moments.
So when you say the opposing counsel surprised us, you are merely transferring a dry piece of data.
Yes, but when you say they threw us a curveball, you aren't just communicating a fact. You are forcing everyone in the room to subconsciously recall the physical sensation of bracing for one reality and having to violently, suddenly adjust their bodies to a completely different reality.
Wow. You are speaking directly to their nervous system.
You really are.
That makes perfect sense for the slow, strategic negotiations of life. You're covering bases, you're waiting for the right pitch. But corporate life and personal life aren't always a slow, deliberate chess match.
No, they certainly aren't.
What happens when the building's on fire? What happens when the deadline is in 4 hours, the servers have crashed, and the clock is literally running out? The slow, pastoral tension of baseball metaphors doesn't quite fit a full-blown crisis.
You've hit on the exact boundary of the baseball metaphor. When the clock is ticking down and disaster is imminent, Americans unconsciously abandon baseball.
What do they pivot to?
They pivot to the high-stakes, violent language of American football and, to some extent, ice hockey. If baseball is the language of long-term strategy and negotiation, football is the language of extreme urgency, physical risk, and dramatic, irreversible decision-making.
Let's examine the ultimate high-stakes phrase in the American corporate dictionary. The Hail Mary.
Oh, that's a good one. To understand the power of a Hail Mary, you have to know the history.
Where does it come from?
The phrase entered the mainstream American consciousness in 1975. The Dallas Cowboys football team was losing a critical playoff game. There were only seconds left on the clock.
So sheer desperation.
Exactly. The quarterback, Roger Staubach, was too far away to execute a normal strategic play. In desperation, he threw the football as far and as high as he possibly could toward the end zone, hoping one of his players would miraculously catch it.
And did they?
They did. After the game, which they won on that miraculous catch, Staubach, who was a devout Catholic, told reporters, "I closed my eyes and said a Hail Mary."
Oh, so that's literally where it comes from.
Yep. It described a desperate, last-second, incredibly long pass where the chances of success are near zero.
But today, that term has completely escaped the football stadium. It is used in boardrooms across the globe to describe any bold, incredibly low probability attempt to save a situation when all other, safer logical options have completely failed.
Let's return to our multinational context to see how differently cultures handle this exact same high-stakes panic. Let's imagine 3 different startup founders in 3 different cities facing the exact same terrifying crisis.
Okay, lay out the crisis.
Their companies are running out of money, they have 1 week of payroll left, and they need to make one final, desperate push to secure funding, or they are bankrupt.
All right, let's look at founder number 1. An Austin, Texas startup founder walks into the conference room, slams their laptop on the table, and tells the team, "Scrapping our main product and pitching this new AI tool is our Hail Mary."
The phrase is bold, it's dramatic, and it almost romanticizes the existential risk.
Now, take that exact same financial crisis to a marketing director in Sydney, Australia. The company is equally close to death. But the Australian director would almost never use the term Hail Mary.
Well, it sounds too theatrical for them. They would look at the team and say, right, the bank is breathing down our necks. Time to have a real crack at this new pitch.
Have a real crack at it.
Yeah, having a crack at it originally stems from the sound of a cricket bat hitting the ball. But in Australian parlance, it means giving something your absolute best effort regardless of the outcome.
So it carries the exact same urgency as the American phrase, but it's wrapped in gritty, understated determination. It says, "We might lose, but we will go down swinging together."
Exactly. And our third founder, the project manager in Vancouver, Canada, rallying their terrified team, they lean on the national anchor ice hockey.
Of course they do.
They tell the room, "Listen, everyone, we are officially in sudden death overtime."
Sudden death overtime.
In hockey playoff games, if the score is tied at the end of regulation time, they play sudden death. The very first team to score a single goal wins the game immediately, and the other team's season is instantly over. The stakes could not be higher.
So we have a critical question for the language learner sitting in that room. If you were running that crisis meeting in Austin, and you decide to use your textbook English and say, "This new AI pitch is our final low probability attempt," instead of saying, "This is our Hail Mary," Does it actually change the psychological reality of the room?
Does the choice of idiom change how the employees accept the risk?
I would argue it absolutely does.
Yeah.
I mean, if you tell me it's a low probability attempt, my brain processes that mathematically. I start updating my resume because the math is bad.
Yeah, true.
But if you tell me we're throwing a Hail Mary, you are acknowledging the gravity, the drama, and the shared emotional burden. You are telling me, I know the odds are terrible, but we are throwing everything we have left into the sky together. It secures emotional buy-in.
The idiom contains emotional DNA. It is a leadership tool, not just a vocabulary word. Now, while a phrase like Hail Mary is obviously connected to sports, you can literally picture the football flying through the air. The truly advanced level of English listening involves phrases where the sport has vanished completely.
Oh, this is the really fascinating part.
We are entering the territory of what linguists call dead metaphors.
Dead metaphors. I love the imagery of that. It sounds like ghosts haunting the dictionary.
They are the ghosts in the language. Dead metaphors are phrases so deeply absorbed into the bedrock of standard English that native speakers completely forget, or frankly never even knew, that they originated on a sports field.
So they just use them naturally without visualizing a sport.
Because the imagery is dead to them, they use these phrases in the most formal, serious contexts imaginable without realizing they're speaking in sports code.
Give me the deep history on some of these, because I know we use them constantly without thinking. What about jump the gun? We use it to mean acting prematurely or ruining a plan by starting too early.
Jump the gun is a perfect example. It comes from the high-tension world of 19th century track and field events. Picture a line of sprinters crouched on a cinder track. The tension is immense.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
The starter holds a physical pistol in the air. If a runner's nerves break and they leap forward before the gun is fired, they have jumped the gun and are penalized or disqualified.
So the physical tension of the runner translates perfectly to a modern business team.
Exactly. Imagine a marketing department launching an advertising campaign before the legal team has actually approved the product. The CEO will furiously say, "Marketing jumped the gun." The sport's origin is forgotten, but the precise feeling of premature, tension-breaking action remains.
What about out of left field? I hear this in corporate strategy meetings all the time. That competitor's new product came completely out of left field, meaning it was bizarre, highly unexpected, or totally surprising. Why the left field?
There are a couple of historical theories, both rooted deeply in early American baseball. One theory traces back to the old West Side Park in Chicago, where the outfield wall in left field was situated right next to a psychiatric hospital.
Wow, really?
Yeah, so a comment coming out of left field meant it sounded like it came from the patients over the wall, crazy or bizarre.
That is wild. What's the other theory?
The more common mechanical explanation is simply that in baseball, a throw from the deep left field corner all the way across the diamond to first base is a very long, unexpected trajectory that surprises the runner.
Okay, that makes a bit more sense mechanically.
Whichever origin you prefer, today, a financial analyst in Manhattan will look at a shocking quarterly earnings report and say, well, that deficit came out of left field without ever visualizing a baseball diamond.
How about the whole 9 yards? Meaning to give absolute full effort, holding absolutely nothing back.
The origins of the whole 9 yards are heavily debated by etymologists. Some say it refers to the length of ammunition belts in World War II machine guns. Others say it's the amount of fabric in a Scottish kilt or the capacity of a concrete mixer.
Oh, so it's not definitely sports.
Well, in the modern American consciousness, it is inextricably linked to American football, where a team must move the ball 10 yards to get a first down. If you are struggling and fighting for the whole 9 yards, you are giving an agonizing, exhaustive physical effort to reach a goal.
And we can't forget boxing. Go the distance, meaning to see a grueling, brutal project through to the very bitter end. That refers to a boxer refusing to be knocked out and surviving all 12 or 15 rounds of a fight.
Exactly.
Or saved by the bell, meaning you were rescued from a terrible situation at the last possible millisecond. In boxing, if you are being beaten senseless, but the round-ending bell rings before you hit the canvas, you survive.
Looking at these dead metaphors, I want to revisit your earlier analogy about learning English. You compared it to knowing the mechanical rules of chess. We can also think of these dead metaphors as the buried foundations of a massive modern city.
The buried foundations.
Okay. When you walk around a city like New York or London, you see the shiny glass skyscrapers of corporate communication. You see formal emails, legal briefs, and quarterly reports.
Right.
You cannot see the original ancient stone bricks buried deep underground, but they are absolutely holding up the entire structure.
You literally cannot navigate the corporate city without relying on those buried sports bricks. I mean, if a consultant in Chicago emails a very formal, traditional, conservative client and writes, "We went the whole 9 yards on this financial audit, but some of these discrepancies came completely out of left field," that reads as perfectly standard, highly professional English.
It doesn't sound casual at all. It sounds competent.
Precisely. For an advanced learner, mastering these dead metaphors is not a fun, optional bonus. It is completely non-negotiable.
No, it really isn't optional. Using them eliminates the very last invisible barrier to native-like fluency. It proves you understand the weight of the words, not just their definitions.
So it's not just about memorizing one or two cool phrases to sound casual at the water cooler. It's about recognizing that there is a massive interconnected ecosystem of expressions.
Fluency isn't knowing isolated words on flashcards. Fluency is understanding the entire web of vocabulary that orbits around the core human concepts of competition, strategy, struggle, and teamwork.
I think of it like acquiring a full set of professional chef's knives, rather than just carrying around a single clunky Swiss Army pocket tool.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Right, with textbook English, you have the pocket tool. It can open a can, it can cut an apple, it gets the basic job done. But to prepare a Michelin star meal, you need the whole set. You need the delicate paring knife for nuance, the serrated bread knife for rough situations, the heavy cleaver for dramatic moments.
You need the whole set to cook the conversational meal properly. Let's look at how some of these specific knives in the linguistic block connect to each other.
Let's do it.
A great place to start that interconnected web is with the phrase "on the back foot." This comes from both cricket and boxing. Mechanically, if a boxer or a cricket batsman shifts their weight onto their back foot, they are retreating.
Right, they're backing away from a punch.
Exactly. They are in a defensive, reactive posture, usually because their opponent has done something aggressive. In business, an executive might say, "After that disastrous PR crisis on Twitter, our marketing team has been on the back foot for weeks." They are reacting, not leading.
And when you are stuck on the back foot, you desperately need to develop a game plan.
Yes, the game plan is the overarching strategy designed to get you off the back foot. It is perhaps the most frequent sports-to-business crossover term in existence.
Because every coach has a game plan before stepping onto the field.
Right. And in a corporate setting, your game plan often revolves around the desire to establish a level playing field.
Explain the physics of a level playing field for us.
In outdoor sports like soccer or rugby, if a field is built on a literal slant, the team playing downhill has a massive, unfair gravitational advantage.
Oh, that makes total sense. Gravity does the work.
Yeah, so a level playing field means fairness, equity, and ensuring that the conditions of the competition don't secretly favor one side. Startups are constantly lobbying governments for regulations that create a level playing field against massive monopolies.
And when you are a small startup fighting against monopolies for that level playing field, you really need someone in your corner.
We return to the boxing ring for that one. In boxing, between rounds, the fighter retreats to their specific corner of the ring. There, their trainer is waiting with water, medical advice, and strategic encouragement.
The trainer is literally in their corner.
Yes. In daily life, having someone in your corner means having a loyal ally, a mentor, or a supporter who defends you when you are exhausted. A manager might pull a struggling employee aside and say, "I know the board is angry about the delay, but don't worry, I'm in your corner."
But sometimes, even with a great game plan and a mentor in your corner, things still go wrong. The project fails, and people just shrug and say, "Well, that's par for the course."
That takes us to the golf course. In golf, par is the predetermined expected number of strokes an expert golfer should need to complete a hole. So if something is par for the course, it means it is entirely typical, expected, and normal, even if it is deeply frustrating.
Like the subway train is delayed again during a rainstorm, par for the course.
Exactly.
But if the situation degrades from merely frustrating to completely hopeless, a team might decide to throw in the towel.
A highly dramatic boxing reference. If a boxer is being beaten so badly that their life or health is in severe danger, but they are too proud to quit, their trainer will physically take the white towel they use to wipe sweat and throw it into the center of the ring.
Oh, to stop the fight.
It is the universal signal to the referee to stop the fight. It means to officially admit defeat and surrender to save yourself from further damage.
Or instead of throwing in the towel, the team might find a hidden reserve of energy and rally.
Right, to rally whether in a tennis match hitting the ball back and forth or a baseball team scoring 5 runs in the final inning means to recover your momentum, organize your forces, and fight back from the brink of defeat.
And perhaps they are able to rally because the team leader had an ace up their sleeve.
Well, technically, from card games like poker, ace up your sleeve groups perfectly with sports strategy. In the old days of saloons, a cheating card player might physically hide an ace, the most powerful card, inside the sleeve of their coat, waiting to drop it into their hand at the most critical moment.
Very sneaky.
In negotiations, it means holding a secret, powerful advantage in reserve, waiting for the perfect time to deploy it to win.
And if you deploy that ace successfully, you might become the front runner.
From horse racing, the front runner is the horse physically leading the pack around the track. In politics or business, it is the leading candidate for a job or the company most likely to win a massive contract.
But team dynamics are complex. Sometimes, to help the team win or to protect the front runner, someone has to take one for the team.
This is deeply tied to the psychology of team sports, like a baseball batter deliberately letting a pitch hit them so they can get on base, or a hockey player throwing their body in front of a 100-mile-per-hour slap shot to block the puck from hitting the goalie.
Ouch.
Yeah, it means voluntarily accepting a painful personal disadvantage or taking the blame for a mistake solely for the benefit of the group.
Because in American corporate culture, the worst thing you can be is a bench warmer.
The players who are not good enough to be on the field during the game sit on the wooden bench on the sidelines. Their only contribution is literally keeping the bench warm with their bodies. Calling an employee a bench warmer is a severe insult.
It means they are passive, untrusted, and not actively contributing to the success of the enterprise.
Absolutely.
Okay, we have built a massive toolkit here. We have analyzed the chef's knives. We understand the buried foundations. We see the overarching geography. Now it is time to move from theory to practice.
Let's see them in action.
We need to watch native speakers using this hidden language in the wild. We have 4 masterclass scenarios to analyze, and I want to really break down the rhythm, the emotional tone, and the subtle social bonding happening in real life. Let's start by walking into a high-end marketing agency in New York City.
Okay. Picture 2 senior advertising strategists, Sarah and Marcus. They have just walked out of a brutal 2-hour video call with their biggest client. Sarah drops her notebook on the desk, exhausted, and says the client completely moved the goalposts on the campaign.
Move the goalposts. Let's analyze that.
Last week, the client explicitly asked for a campaign focused on brand awareness. Today, they suddenly demanded it focus entirely on immediate lead generation.
Imagine playing a game of soccer, and right as you kick the ball toward the net, someone physically picks up the metal goalposts and drags them 20 feet to the left.
It makes scoring impossible.
Right. It denotes supreme unfairness and changing the rules after the heavy lifting has already started.
But Sarah is a New Yorker. She doesn't wallow in defeat. She immediately pivots and says, look, if we restructure the analytics, we can still knock it out of the park.
She acknowledges the timeline is incredibly tight, saying it's going to go right down to the wire, but they can do it. Marcus feeds off her energy, nods, and says, all right, let's step up to the plate. And Sarah finishes the conversation by simply saying, game on.
The rhythm of that exchange is fascinating. It's fast, it's boom, 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 ambition, high energy, urgency.
Think about the learner listening to this. If Sarah and Marcus had used textbook English and said, the client changed the requirements unfairly, however, we can still do a good job. The deadline is close. Let us take responsibility. The conversation would be entirely drained of that aggressive New York hustle.
It would sound robotic. It would lack all the emotional energy, the adrenaline, and the team-building warmth that the idioms provide. By using sports language, Sarah and Marcus are psyching each other up for a fight.
All right, now let's cross the Atlantic and observe an entirely different emotional landscape. We are in a dimly lit pub in Manchester, England. 2 colleagues, James and Emma, are having a quiet pint after work, discussing a highly controversial promotion in their department.
The gossip is that someone named Davies just got promoted to senior director, completely bypassing Priya, who is objectively the hardest worker on the team.
Emma takes a sip of her pint, looks at James, and says, Well, the Davies promotion has created a bit of a sticky wicket, hasn't it?
James nods slowly and points out that while Priya's technical work is brilliant, Davies knows exactly how to bat for himself when the senior management is in the room.
And Emma smiles knowingly and replies, Priya's time will come. She'll have her innings.
I absolutely love the stark contrast here. The New York conversation was aggressive and loud. Here, the entire linguistic effort is focused on minimizing drama and maintaining social equilibrium.
The British understatement is performing enormous psychological work. Calling a grossly unfair corporate promotion a bit of a sticky wicket minimizes what is clearly a highly toxic situation, keeping the conversation polite and professional, even in a pub.
Exactly. When James says Davies knows how to bat for himself, he is using a cricket metaphor to describe arrogant self-promotion and office politics, but doing so without sounding aggressively critical or vulgar.
And have her innings.
In cricket, an innings is a team's or an individual's turn to bat. By saying Priya will have her innings, Emma is expressing deep confidence that Priya will eventually get her rightful turn to shine, wrapped in this lovely, characteristic British warmth and patience.
For the language learner, the takeaway is crucial. If a non-native speaker jumped into that quiet pub conversation and used a loud American idiom, if they slammed their fist on the table and shouted, Davies really hit a home run with that promotion, it would shatter the delicate, understated social dynamic of the room. It would feel incredibly jarring.
Completely jarring. Okay, let's head to the Southern Hemisphere. We're at a sunny weekend barbecue in Brisbane, Australia. Liam is flipping burgers, and he asks his mate Nat how his big software engineering job interview went on Friday.
Nat grabs a drink, laughs, and says they bowled me a googly right out of the gate by ignoring his resume and giving him a surprise 2-hour live coding test on a whiteboard.
We know a googly is a deceptive cricket pitch. But what strikes me is that he's laughing about a terrifying interview experience.
Right, because in Australian workplace culture, the idiom captures the surprise and the difficulty, but frames it with humor rather than complaint. Complaining is frowned upon.
Nat continues, saying he had a real crack at it, meaning he didn't panic, he just gave it his absolute best effort. He thinks he showed the interviewers that he has the stamina to go the distance. Liam hands him a burger, raises his beer, and simply says, "Good on ya, mate, you'll be right."
The focus here is mateship. It is supportive, incredibly informal, and completely lacking in the corporate melodrama you might find in the US or the stiff upper lip of the UK. The language learner here needs to use these phrases to build camaraderie, not to show off business acumen.
And finally, let's examine the cultural bridge. We are at a crowded startup networking event in Toronto, Canada. A tech founder is standing in a circle of peers telling a harrowing war story about a lead back-end developer who suddenly quit just 3 days before a massive product launch.
She tells the group she was completely blindsided.
Which is American football. A quarterback is focused downfield, and a massive defender tackles him violently from his blind spot, the side he isn't looking at. It means being caught completely off guard by a devastating blow.
She continues, saying they couldn't just punt on the launch because their major venture capital investors were watching closely.
Another American football reference, meaning they couldn't just delay the launch and kick the problem to the next quarter.
Exactly. So she explains her game plan. She brought in expensive freelance contractors, ordered pizzas, and the entire team went into sudden death overtime for 72 straight hours of coding.
Hockey. The ultimate Canadian cultural anchor makes its appearance when the pressure is highest.
And the story ends happily.
Yeah.
She shipped the software on time, and she tells her friends that the new contractors knocked it out of the park.
This conversation is a brilliant masterclass because it shows exactly how Canada operates as a linguistic and cultural bridge. The founder seamlessly blends the high-stakes, aggressive American energy of blindsided and knocking it out of the park with the collective, survivalist rallying cry of Canadian hockey in sudden death overtime.
This masterclass raises a really important analytical question for me. Let's run an experiment. What if that Toronto startup founder, instead of saying the team went into sudden death overtime, had chosen to describe her 72-hour pizza-fueled coding marathon as a sticky wicket? What happens to the narrative?
Oh, the entire narrative collapses under the weight of the wrong metaphor. It would have instantly drained all the energetic, collaborative, high-stakes momentum out of the room.
The listener would feel a jarring psychological disconnect between the intense, gritty reality of a 72-hour coding marathon and the quaint, polite, understated British idiom. It would sound almost sarcastic.
Context and geographic location are absolutely everything. The idiom must map perfectly onto the cultural terrain, or the message is lost.
So if I am a learner listening to this deep dive right now, I might be feeling a significant wave of anxiety. I am recognizing the exhausting daily reality of what it actually takes to operate at a high level in English.
It is a lot to take in.
We've all been there. You smile politely in the meeting, you nod your head as if you understand, and under the conference table, you are frantically typing, "What does punt mean in business?" into Google on your phone so nobody sees you sweating.
The first thing we need to do is pause and acknowledge the sheer courage it takes to exist and operate in a second language. Navigating a professional world where high-level corporate strategy and 19th century cricket rules share the exact same vocabulary is a monumental intellectual task. It is exhausting.
But you do not have to be paralyzed by it. There are concrete, actionable steps you can take today to move from just passively recognizing these phrases to achieving unconscious, effortless fluency.
Yes. I want to talk about practical application. Let's detail the sticky note method, because I think it is the most effective tool a learner can use.
The sticky note method, how does that work?
It is incredibly effective because it forces active recall. Right now, pick just 3 idioms from this deep dive. Not 10, not 20, just 3.
Okay, let's say you choose ballpark figure, on the back foot, and game plan.
Write them down on a physical sticky note and place it right on the edge of your computer monitor, or pin it to the top of your phone's Notes app where you see it constantly. For the next 7 days, your mission is to force yourself to use those 3 phrases in real-world communication.
Can you give me a ballpark figure into an email to a vendor? Tell a colleague you need to work on a game plan for next week.
And the key here is that you have to be willing to use them imperfectly at first. It is exactly like developing muscle memory in actual sports. You cannot become a professional baseball pitcher by sitting in a library reading a physics textbook about the aerodynamics of a baseball.
You have to physically step onto the dirt field, hold the ball, and throw it. And the first 10 times you throw it, you are going to throw it badly. It's going to hit the dirt. You are going to feel awkward.
But you adjust your grip and you throw it again and again until eventually your arm just knows exactly what to do without your brain having to calculate the physics.
The historical record of language acquisition actually supports that intuition perfectly. You have to embrace the messy, awkward reality of practice. And you can drastically accelerate this muscle memory through physical immersion in the culture.
If you live in an English-speaking country, join a casual recreational sports league in your city. If you are in London, go play five-a-side football, which is just a faster, smaller version of soccer played on a tiny artificial pitch.
If you are in Los Angeles, join a casual weekend softball league. Even if you are terrible at the sport, the language you will absorb on the sidelines is invaluable.
If you don't live in an English-speaking country, change your media diet. Watch American football or British cricket on YouTube with the English subtitles turned on. Pay special attention to the post-game interviews with the coaches. They speak almost exclusively in these idioms.
I think we need to set realistic expectations for the listener. What is the actual timeline here? If I start the sticky note method today and I start watching sports interviews tonight, when do I magically wake up sounding like a hardened New York executive or a relaxed Melburnian at a barbecue?
You have to be realistic and kind to yourself with the timeline. It generally takes about 1 to 2 weeks of focused, intentional listening to simply activate your radar.
Suddenly, you will start hearing jump the gun and cover your bases everywhere. In movies, on the news, in podcasts.
But to achieve that true unconscious ease the magical moment where the phrase slips out of your mouth in a high-pressure meeting without a split second of mental translation, that requires about 3 to 6 months of consistent, real-world practice.
It's an investment, but the return on that investment is massive. Once you cross that threshold of fluency, you unlock a completely different level of professional and social existence.
You absolutely do. Suddenly, you are no longer viewed just as the technically proficient international hire. You are viewed as a true cultural fit. Colleagues start trusting you with the subtle nuances of office politics.
You're invited into the inner circle of communication where the real decisions are made. You stop translating and you start participating.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I know you always like to leave the listener with something philosophical to chew on, something that stretches the boundaries of everything we've analyzed today.
I do. This exploration raises a profound psychological question for all of us to ponder. We have clearly established over the last hour that a massive percentage of our professional and personal English relies entirely on the language of sports.
Right?
And sports, by their very nature, require winners, losers, opponents, defensive postures, and a ticking clock. If the language we speak shapes the way we think, does speaking this way secretly condition our psychology?
Right, that's interesting.
Does relying on this sports-based operating system force us to view every business negotiation, every creative project, and every daily life challenge as a zero-sum competition that must be aggressively won or lost?
It certainly frames it that way.
And what might happen to our stress levels, our workplaces, and our broader culture if we consciously chose to build our everyday metaphors from the world of music or the world of architecture instead of drawing them from the battlefield of the stadium?
Wow. Think about how that would change a meeting. If instead of saying, we need to throw a Hail Mary to beat the competition, a CEO said, we need to find the right harmony to complete this structure. That is a completely different, much more collaborative world. It changes the entire metagame.
Thank you for that incredible insight. And thank you to everyone out there for joining us on this linguistic journey. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.